Good morning, this is Lisa Hampton. I am the Director of Prevention and Intervention for Youth Services here at DFSS, and we welcome you to our webinar for the Service Coordination and Navigation for Youth at Highest Risk of Violence Involvement. A few housekeeping tips before we get going. We're going to run through basically our RFP review, and we'll have different points and times for questions. One will stop right after the complete review of the actual project scope for questions. Then we'll go into the performance measures. We'll open it up for questions again there. And then we'll go into sort of e-procurement activities, how to open an amendment and how to actually upload your submission. And throughout, you can always type email messages to us. On your webinar allows you to basically type in your messages. Strongly suggest that you let us go through a portion of the RFP first. Some of your questions might be answered ahead of time. We will also post this PowerPoint, as well as do an amendment of all of our pre-submittal conferences and questions or frequently asked questions that have come up. So once again, it will be helpful for you to know how to open an amendment, because that is how we will do the posting of that information. The other piece I just want to point out is you also have two attachments to this PowerPoint that are funding opportunities. As we walk through this, you may realize this is not the right thing for you. It is a different direction for us here at DFSS with this RFP. And so we wanted to also provide people with some opportunities through the Mayor's Office of Violence Reduction, has given us some opportunities to share. And so you also have a flyer that's a handout that's attached for R3 funding from the state level, as well as some opportunities at Cook County. I am going to skip over the DFSS pieces, and then I'm going to jump right into sort of the youth services piece, as well as kind of what our priorities are. So just to remind folks, or let folks know, for the department ourselves, this is a new RFP, particularly for the Youth Service Division priorities, really helps fall in line with our goals of being able to leverage and assess and strengthen young adults ages 6 to 24 in the city of Chicago, really aiming to support their growth, development, and success. One of the things that we spent a lot of time doing in this particular RFP was really thinking about where were there gaps, where were there best practice information that we could learn from, and really honing in on what was the population that we wanted to really impact the most. And so this RFP is a reflection of that. I want to spend a lot of time, and you'll hear me say repeatedly throughout this, that we are targeting youth at the highest risk of violence. I know on this chart it says gun violence, but we've actually made it a little bit broader in the RFP. And so we want to be really clear, this is not a replacement for programs that are sunsetting. So this is not a replacement for Bridge. This is not a replacement for RISE. This is a brand new initiative. And so we are targeting youth that are at the highest risk. And we are looking for folks that have experience, knowledge, expertise, as well as are locally or hyper-local in their ability to deliver services to that population. So this is, it's very different, and so we just want to make sure that we stress that. I also want to stress this is not this webinar is not a replacement for individuals in reading the RFP. We expect and hope that you read the RFP thoroughly and understand everything that we are trying to accomplish in the RFP with you, and so you have a very clear understanding of that. Please don't allow the webinar to be the only thing that informs your ability to apply for this RFP. On that, we will jump right in. So once again, we are talking about the service coordination navigation for youth at the highest risk of violence involvement. We are seeking to support service coordination and navigation for youth ages 14 to 24 from one of the following target community areas: Austin, North Lawndale, Humboldt Park, East Garfield Park, Inglewood, Auburn Gresham, West Garfield Park, and Roseland. The goal is to stabilize eligible youth in their current environment, increase their self-efficacy, and assist in their transition to adulthood. This RFP will also require all delegate agencies that are awarded to participate in a learning cohort experience. We anticipate funding 4 to 8 agencies depending on budget submissions, and contract terms are on January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2022 with an option of a 1-year renewal. We anticipate that we will award folks somewhere between $300,000 to $500,000 per award. Because of that, we will spend a lot of time on the next couple of slides because this is really where we want to have people have a very clear understanding that we are doing things a little differently in that sense. So our RFP development process was really looking at best practice in the field, looking at what community-based organizations were already doing on the ground here in Chicago as well as nationally, looking at places like Philly to New York to Florida, and then really thinking about what were their potential gaps. And so we had opportunities where we talked to individuals to learn about what those gaps were, and then what we were hearing from current delegate agencies about what made it difficult for you to do the work, and then what we could potentially do in this RFP here. So we did that in 4 stages. We researched national promising best practice models, we looked at hub models, we looked at working with juvenile justice youth, we looked at particularly gender responsiveness, and particularly working with individuals that were LGBTQ plus community because we knew that was a service gap area, but also those were populations that were also at highest risk of violence as well. And so we really wanted to think about, in our own programming, our own limitations. Oftentimes we were only doing programming for young men, and we really wanted to think about, well, what were best practices for other populations. We also had 2 listening sessions last August with current delegate agencies, and we asked folks to tell us what was working, what was not working, and what you wished DFSS could do differently. And then we did a release for a request for information in September. And at that point, we really honed in on client-driven services, case management, professional development, and particularly gender responsiveness. All of those things culminated in this RFP that we are launching today. In addition to that, we also had a new mayor's administration come in, and within that, they have their own priorities and efforts that they wanted to focus on, which neatly aligned with some of the changes that the commissioner was already putting in place. And so there is an alignment with the Deputy Mayors for Education and Human Service in this RFP, as well as the Mayor's Office of Violence Reduction. And that alignment is centered around focus on place, so really thinking about gun violence in the 15 community areas that have been identified by the city. This RFP is focusing on 8 of those communities, partly because they are in order based on sort of the information around violence victimization results, as well as the fact that we just have limited resources. So as a first step effort, we are looking at what are the opportunities within those first 8 communities. The second focus alignment is around highest risk of violence involvement, and that you'll see as we talk about eligibility criteria. And then third, there is a trauma-informed component. The city is really focused on cognitive behavioral therapy. That is reflected in this RFP as well, with a little bit of a broader spectrum coming from the DFSS frame. So what does a successful RFP submission look like, and what we hope is, once again, that we're hoping that individuals can really be able to apply their expertise and best practices working with youth service coordination and navigation models. That's the best practice information in the RFP is not just for your easy reading. It is things that we hope that you understand that is the bread and butter of what we are looking to see people be able to respond to in this RFP. We want to see strong and effective communication and networking skills with youth who are at the highest risk of involvement with the referral partners. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, because once again, that is another area where that is really what will make this a successful venture for both of us. Incorporating building blocks for working with youth at the highest risk. Most importantly, thinking about how you are incorporating youth voice, not just by doing surveys, but really incorporation of youth voice throughout the process. Utilizing mechanisms to support place-based, community-based organizations. There is a strong emphasis on place in this RFP, your ability to understand the communities that you wish to serve, who is in the community, what are the challenges of those communities, what is the network that currently exists. And so we hope to see people demonstrate that they've done the work, that they have spoken to people, and not only have MOUs on paper, but a real plan where they have leveraged other collaborators at the table. We have often said, as we've done the research for this RFP, we do not think there's one entity out here that can do everything, and so we are really strongly encouraging people to think about what are resources that are in the community that folks can leverage as subcontractors and as partners in this venture, and we want to be able to see people demonstrate that in their submissions. Lastly, the other thing is in regards to being able to, once again, talk about the option of being able to provide those services in one of the 8 community areas identified, and be able to create and implement a strong, comprehensive outreach strategy plan. Program requirements. So we are targeting young adults 14 to 24 for this, and we've been calling the word program, but I'm a little bit hesitant to call it a program because it really is about being able to meet young people where they're at. This is going to be a really high touch, very individualized sort of partnership you're going to have with young people in community. Because of that, and because of the value that is attached to what we're the award, we are asking respondents to develop a program budget that is based on a $7,000 cost per youth for a comprehensive array of services, and we'll go into what services you can think about as you put your budget together. That's not a recommendation, that is a requirement, so you will need to put your budget together based on that cost per participant. Respondents must demonstrate the following, as we've talked about: a strong understanding of challenges, a referral and communication network, utilize best practices that have been identified in the RFP, and then being able to really think about having it, utilizing trauma-informed and gender and LGBTQ+ responsive navigators and managers. The other piece we want to point out is that we are requiring that organizations, which is must have a current operating internal budget of $250,000 or more. This is not new. We had the same sort of requirement, I think, in our last couple of RFPs. But what we want to stress right now is that is the first thing we will check once the RFP closes and we start to evaluate the RFP. The first thing that we do check is the fiscal capacity. If you're not able to demonstrate the fiscal capacity at the front end, we will not read your proposal at all. So we want to make sure people understand that it is a current operating internal budget, and that does not include the award you potentially could get for this. It has to be current dollars that you currently have in your organization. Program requirements. So we are focusing on best practice, and we've identified several best practices for individuals to think about, or that we've identified as things that we believe, based on our research, connect with youth who are in need of services who are at the highest risk of violence. And that is trauma-informed care, utilizing a cognitive behavioral therapy, service coordination and navigation models for youth, strength-based approaches to working with youth, a family-centered approach, place-based knowledge, and gender responsiveness services. All of these are clearly discussed in the RFP and have additional links that give examples of what we mean by that. What I will focus on is the place-based knowledge and gender responsiveness services here today. We are really looking at individuals who understand the community area that they're going to be engaged with young people in services, and that there is a gender responsiveness lens to the work as well. A lot of what we heard through our research was sort of lack of services, particularly around for young girls, but also for the LGBTQ+ community, and then oftentimes there is a correlation between violence there. So that is something, once again, that is in the RFP, and we just want to elevate here so people understand that that is under the best practice column, and we expect people to be able to address that in their RFP submissions. Our targeted population, once again, 14 to 24, and then the 8 communities are listed once again in the page. Eligibility criteria. So this is one of the areas where DFSS is really targeting. We are honing in on youth at the highest risk of violence involvement. I can't say that enough. We are looking for people who don't necessarily like, oh, that's an interesting population I would really like to think about serving. We want to know if people are doing the work already or actively engaged in that work and or have the capacity with partners to be able to execute on that work. So the criteria is very clear, and this is what we are looking for, and our delegate agencies will have to verify the organization, or will have to verify this information as well. So having those relationships around these particular criteria will be helpful. So the first criteria is individuals have to either be actively street engaged or have a historical or current justice involvement. And so I won't go into every one of those there. If someone has a particular question, by all means review those. These are non-negotiables around the young adults that we are looking to serve. So the criteria one is active street engagement, or historical or current justice involvement. The second criteria is any of the four things listed on the right side of this page or in the gray box area for those that can see the gray box area. That's previous victimization, symptoms of trauma, disconnected from school, or violent online behavior. Once again, that is the criteria, and we will be asking for verification of those criteria. Next slide. How are you going to execute these services? We've really spent a lot of time in the research of best practice talking about a caring adult, a relationship, a coach, a mentor, an advocate that is really able to, one, build trust with a young adult, and two, be able to help them navigate their way through services to help sort of gain stability and be able to help increase their sense of safety. For this RFP, we are calling this person a navigator. This person is a full-time employee. Once again, this is non-negotiable. We do not want to have someone who is a navigator for this program who's also a mentor, who's also your office assistant, who's also running an after-school program. We believe that the level and intensity of services require this person to be a full-time employee, and it also means that we have to pay that person accordingly. So based on what we heard from the field, we are also being very clear and stipulating what the salary range is. Once again, the 42 to 46 is the range. If you'd like to go higher than 46, by all means so, but this is the range, and once again, needs to be reflected in your budget. What is a navigator? In addition to a host of other things they will be doing, the main things they will be doing is engagement and recruitment resources. They'll be doing intake screening, assessment for case planning, wraparound services and support, and then be responsible for connection and coaching. So I'm not going to go into all the details here, but I want to point out underutilization of the following engagement and recruiting sources. Once again, we are trying to align ourselves with the mayor's office as well as the Chicago Department of Public Health. So we want to see that folks are leveraging the partners that are listed here, as well as additional ones of your own that we know are targeting and are working with youth that are at the highest risk of violence involvement. So if folks have a strong relationship with a Chicago Police Department commander or a district, and it happens to fall in the community area, and it's the community area that you know and want to do services in and have that experience, then we expect that you will have a partnership with Chicago Police Department. If you are already engaged in violence reduction services and working with street outreach teams that are funded through the Department of Public Health, then we expect that will be something we will see that you will highlight in your recruitment outreach plan. So once again, these are the ones that we want to ensure that we have and see relationships with, but you should feel free to add others as long as they're able to justify being able to meet the highest need use criteria. Lastly, under coaching and connection and coaching, we also once again want to reiterate that we are anticipating that each of the agencies will serve somewhere between 30 and 75 youth annually. Once again, you are telling us in your budget how many young people you expect to serve, how many navigators, and in what community area. And so therefore, in addition to the salary, as well as the cost per participant, all of these things should be reflected in your budget. Program managers. So once again, we anticipate the navigators will have a heavy lift, and we'll need a program manager, which will also be a full-time person who will be engaged in support and serve in almost an administrative capacity for them. We purposely did not call these folks case managers because they're supervisors in some ways that they are engaged in a different level of service, particularly with the young adults as well as with each other. And the real focus here is around being able to have someone who's maintaining and cultivating ongoing community collaborations and referral processes, figuring out what's working, what's not, figuring out who are we targeting the right population, do we have the right referral sources, what do those relationships look like. The individual also we expect should be coordinating some kind of monthly communication with community referral partners, ensuring that there's delivery of services and access to services for young adults, and being able to work directly with the navigator around supervision. We anticipate that this is going to be a very potentially highly stressful job, and we want there not just to be basic supervision, but reflective supervision, which once again is defined in the RFP, but that it is an opportunity for the program manager to support the navigator, build their ability around professional development, and address any gaps in services as well as any self-care needs that they might have. And so the program manager may take on a host of other things with the navigator, but these are the three main things that we would like the program manager to be engaged with. Once again, within all of that, we want people to be thinking about bringing on community partners that are also trauma-informed, that also have a racial equity lens to their work, and that have experience working with LGBTQ+ community and the female population. Throughout this, that should be something people should be thinking about and reflect in their application responses. And lastly, before we get to the first set of questions, if people have any, start typing away, is learning cohorts. And so once again, this is the learning cohort or learning experience. Learning cohort experience is going to be a required activity. At minimum, we anticipate that there will be 4, but that is the minimum. But it's really about building a peer-to-peer support community among the delegate agencies who are awarded this, as well as DFSS staff. This is a journey for all of us. This is something new for us in our portfolio, and we don't know yet what we don't know. And so we really want to have a very hands-on engagement with delegate agencies who are awarded these grants, and being able to really think about what is that learning going to look like? What kind of data are we going to see? Are we measuring the right things? Are we targeting the right folks? And so we really want to use the learning cohort to be able to do that. We also want to use that to provide some professional development for navigators and program managers, as well as build some organizational capacity. What we clearly heard from folks throughout the last year was that sometimes people struggle programmatically because of their own organizational constraints. And so we want to use this learning cohort as an opportunity to build some professional development, but also think about what organizational structures are in place that maybe impact your ability to be able to deliver on outcomes on grants in a negative or positive way. And so in the RFP, we identify a whole host of critical trainings and areas that we want to focus on. Some of these are just highlighted right here. Once again, they're clearly a strong CBT, trauma-informed focus, case coordination and problem solving, housing options for youth, logic models, and then internal hiring practices and strategies. How do you keep good people in your shop? And so those are all the things, if not more things, we will be targeting. So that time, if anyone has any questions that they'd once again like to type in, you have the ability just to type in on the side. Everyone can see your questions, and we'll read them out as well. So if people are about to type something and you say, oh, that person already got to it, not a problem at all. So please start typing away if you have any questions right now. Our first question right now is, does the $7,000 per youth include all costs regarding navigator, salary, and others? So once again, if you read the entire RFP, it is clearly identified that that is the cost only per youth. And then within the budget section of the application, it tells you everything else. We are asking you to put together the budget. We are stipulating what the $7,000 is, and then within the $7,000, we anticipate a whole host of ancillary services will be addressed. So for example, transportation support, cell phones, access to a phone line, email addresses, access to Wi-Fi, financial literacy and income support, if there's any stipends or incentives. All of you have to let us know what you think those $7,000 worth of services will cover based on what you know about the population and about the needs in that community. Any other questions right now? You mentioned the age range at 14 to 24. We work with partners who serve youth 14 to 18. Do we have to serve the full range? Once again, you are telling us the range. We are anticipating that if you are serving the community, then you should be have the ability to service young adults in the community based on what your referral sources are. So once again, you're going to tell us what your referral and engagement strategy is going to be, who you're targeting in that. Ideally, we'd like for you to serve the range in the community. I think one of the things we've learned in our own DFSS programming is we often run cohorts, or we have age requirements that say you have to be this age to this age. We're trying to move away from that, and that youth may have a whole host of issues, and they may range in age. And so ideally, do you have partners who can serve 14 to 18? But if you have a 24-year-old who meets the criteria, what are the other folks in that partners you have that can serve those folks if you cannot? So we are looking for people to be able to think about what is the range within the community area, and do we have service partners to meet all of those needs based on age. Any other questions? Okay, so we are going to move ahead with, oh, I see one more. And keep them coming. We're not limiting them. We have time. So the next question is DFSS looking at revising the submittal deadline, given that most organizations are focusing on responding for the pressing needs of the virus? Actually, at this time, we are not. We actually are giving people an extended time. Normally, our RFP period is actually shorter than this. This has been posted since the first week of March, and it will go through May 5th. And so this is actually an extended time period for posting, so we don't anticipate that there will be any change at this time in the submission, in the deadline for submission. Awesome. We're going to move on to performance measures. So how are we going to track all this? So as I indicated, this is new. We're excited. We're looking at what we're doing. In addition to that, as the department has moved from outputs to outcomes, we have also moved this RFP and our performance measures to outcomes. So for those of you who currently maybe have done programming with us in the past, there's a little bit more of an emphasis on not just how many people did you serve, where they come from, but there's really a focus on how do you know that your service actually did something, really impacted someone. So that is what we are looking at. Once again, these are what we think may happen. These are things that we right now think are priorities for us. As time goes on, those may change. We may learn from you that we maybe are asking the wrong thing. But how you should think about the work that you are potentially going to put in your submission and what those outcomes will be is around the 5 that are identified here with right now. So once again, we're not limited to these, but this is what we are looking at right now. That 40% of youth will be less likely to engage in violence based on intake criteria. 50% of youth will have a sense of increased safety for a person, family, and community. 75% of youth will report a growth and sense of personal agency or self-efficacy. And within the RFP, we define what self-efficacy is. We also define it here for you again. The percentage of youth that engage in and sustain supporting programming identified. So this isn't just about how many referrals did you make. We're asking how many referrals did you make, how many did the young adult engage in and are currently still engaged in. So this really is about, once again, not just the referrals, but about that engagement level. And then enhanced physical and emotional wellness for the young adult. And we're really leveraging that through healing-centered engagement, through trauma-informed care services. We are asking individuals to have one CBT-oriented activity a month. We're not requiring it, but if there is a need for people to identify for a long-term individual CBT engagement, that is offered and that there is some engagement happening. This list, once again, is not exhaustive. You have to and need to read the RFP to see the complete list as well. And then on the next slide, we have some additional, just sort of more output things that we will always continue to measure as we normally do. So number of youth recruited, percentage of youth that meet the target population, percentage of youth connected to services, the length of time of services, and then the number of learning cohort sessions attended by staff. So how are we going to measure all of that? So as we are going to evaluate, the way the process works is we will pull down all of the RFPs after the close of the submission on May 5th, and there's 4 selection criteria that we'll be using to evaluate individual proposals. The first is strength of proposed program. Clearly, that's just the bulk of what we are looking for is, did you read the RFP? Did you understand what we talked about? And were you able to then put together a program model that is supports what we've and tries to align with our best practice? We strongly, once again, this is not a cut and paste. So for those that have done RFPs for the youth division before, this is not, you cannot cut and paste your bridge program and put it in here. You cannot cut and paste your BHS program and put it in here. This is something that you really have to read, and we really ask people to think about. And I said I use program model loosely because it's really about engagement. And so people need to understand we are using program model in a very different way here. And so really want to see that you're able to demonstrate that in your proposal, having a clear understanding of the target population and their needs. Once again, we hope that people have experience working with the population, that they understand the needs, they understand the community, that they understand what the community challenges are, and they understand how to deliver on those. And if not, we hope is that people may have a strong desire, but if you can't be the lead, that then you partner with someone and be a subcontractor. Once again, there isn't really one agency that we see can do all of this. We expect people to, we want to see people have done the work in the community to figure out what are our community assets that we have that we could be leveraging. The second part of that selection criteria we're going to be looking at is program performance, outcomes, and quality. So once again, that the respondent is able to demonstrate evidence of strong past performance against desired outcome goals, has relevant systems and processes in place to track and performance. We are really moving to a new place here at DFSS, and particularly youth services, in this next year, and tracking data, reporting data is going to be critical. And I think for folks who have worked with us in the past, we may have been a little bit more lax around, hey, have you put your stuff into CitySpan? No, or I've had my stuff in CitySpan, but it's not really reflective of that. We are setting up a very transparent reporting system that will report out on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis to city council members, as well as leadership in the mayor's office. So this is going to be a very transparent and very open data sharing process. We want people to be clear about that because we will be asking people to really hone in on what is going on. And not only what is going on that is success, but what is going on that is a challenge. Those things are all going to be critical for us as we look at that. So we want to be transparent about, there will be a lot of eyes looking at data, and people need to understand, do we have the systems and mechanisms in order to be able to track our outcomes? We want to be able to see folks are then using that data to improve services. So are you able to and demonstrate in your proposal your ability to use data to make effective, to be fluid, to be flexible, to be adaptable in how you are working with young people? And then lastly, do you have the relevant systems and processes in place in your organization to collect and store key data for participants. Organizational capacity is the third area we're looking at, and that is being able to hire qualified staff to oversee the program and management. It seems like that's a no-brainer, but this is a program where retention, hiring the right folks, being able to have supports in place is critical and can potentially impact your program outcomes. And so we want to be clear about, do you have qualified staff in place? Do you have adequate systems and processes for monitoring program expenditures and fiscal control? We are, once again, another area that we are really honing in on, given the state of the city and current fiscal issues. We want to know, are people using their dollars effectively? Do you have the adequate HR capacity to hire and manage staff, professional development structures, and as well as it reflects the diversity of people in the community. We really want people to think about, are there people with lived experience that can be leveraged into the system? How are you leveraging youth voice into the system? All of those things we want to see in this organizational capacity piece. And lastly, reasonable cost, budget justification, and leverage of funds. Once again, we've put pretty clear markers around the $7,000 per youth. We also want the budget to be reflective of the navigator salary, however many navigators you hope to have, as well as how many young adults you hope to serve, and any of those other pieces. Within the RFP application, there is a budget form, and we've provided a whole host of budget things. So once again, if you read the budget, if you read the RFP completely and look at all the application questions, a lot of the things we have provided for you. So there is a budget form in there. There is a list of what things are allowable costs, what are some things we want you to think about as you put your budget together. And once again, just another reminder that we will only be looking and reviewing submissions that have a current operating budget of $250,000 or more in order for you to advance to the selection criteria stage. At this time, I am going to stop and see if there's any questions anyone has at this point before we turn it over to Julia, who will talk about the EProcurement process, iSupplier, and setting up your application submission and how to accept amendments. So we'll pause for a minute in case anyone has any questions. Okay, must participants reside in the awarded area only, or can they come from any of the 8 targeted areas? You are targeting young adults from that community area. Once again, what we are anticipating are a couple things, and that is that we want young adults to be able to access services in the community they're most comfortable with. We are acknowledging a few things. If we're serving youth at the highest risk, there may be gang activity, there may be limitations about where they can travel to. The idea is you as the delegate agency are not servicing the entire city. You are applying and responding to a community area, and you are indicating to us that you have a level of expertise in serving that community area and using those community areas. That's what we want to see reflective. And so if you want to serve more than one community area, you have to apply for each community area separately. Given the list, I don't know if anybody wants to do that. But what we want is a depth of knowledge in the community area with kids and young adults from those community areas based on the referral sources listed earlier who meet the eligibility requirement. All of those things have to be through the lens of the community area that you choose. Second question, if we are doing trauma-informed care, but it's not CBT, is it worth applying? I can't tell you if it's worth applying. If you read the RFP, we've left a lot of flexibility about that. I think we say trauma-informed care. We use CBT as an option, and there are, as an example of that, in there, but it's pretty wide, and that they're healing-centered engagement activities. There's a whole host of things. So if you read the RFP under that section, at that point, you would need to be able to make that decision internally about whether or not this fits. Will you be requiring us to use a certain data management system, or will there be forms we will fill out? We currently use CitySpan. We anticipate that that's probably the same platform we will use, but we are spending the rest of this year looking at that. What I will say is we are going to be asking people to be doing a high level of data collection. It is a new program, and so the expectation around data collection will be high. Right now we are using CitySpan, but we will be using the rest of this year to figure out if that's the right system for us for this particular award. Will there be only one award per community? No, we are targeting, every submission will be reviewed based on the 4 selection criteria areas, and we based accordingly. So this is not something where we are making any promises or indicators that there is one per community. The resources don't allow for that. So that's why we've clearly stated in the RFP that we are focusing on the 8 communities with the anticipation that we will award anywhere between 4 to 8, depending on people's budget submissions. Does the $7,000 per use include the administrative costs? Once again, that is something you'll need to look at within the budget piece in the RFP, but the $7,000 is for the cost of doing business with young adults. What we have historically seen sometimes is people lowball what services are needed with young adults at the cost of administrative costs or other pieces. And we also see that with salaries. That is why those 2 things are pretty much non-negotiable here. It's $7,000 per use, and that is the cost for doing business with the young adults for services, and then the salary for the navigator. If we apply to serve more than one community, do we need to submit a separate application for each community area? Yes. Any other questions? Oh, I see someone typing away. Okay. Are current participants ineligible, although they may meet the high risk? So once again, this is not a continuation of any program. This is not, so there are no current participants for this. This is a brand new program. Keep in mind, this doesn't start till January. And so we expect people to go out and put their recruitment skills and engagement skills in order to be able to go out and target the highest risk youth population. We are targeting that because we're not sure that any of our programs currently are doing that. So this is a new program, and we are anticipating new recruitment strategies, new recruitment paths, and new participants. Okay, do organizations submitting proposals have to operate, open an office in the targeted community area? So once again, based on your program model, you will need to be able to tell us that. Some of these services will be in the community with the participant. Some of them may require the participant to come into an office space. You will need to tell us that in your submission, whether or not you are currently operating there, whether you are currently opening an office indoor if you plan to do so. Keep your questions coming. We're going to keep moving on. Applications are due on May 5th at noon. So once again, there's 2 months. This is more time than we give for most of our average ones because we know it's a heavy lift. There's a lot of conversations that have to potentially be had, which can be had virtually or in person, depending on the social distancing you want to practice. And but they are due at noon on May 5th. And Julia is going to sort of talk about and go into all of the EProcurement procedures and tips for you as you think about your application submission.
Hi, this is Julia Talbot. You've probably seen my name on RFPs if you've filled one out for the department at all. I'm going to go through a little bit about the EProcurement system, which is the system that the city uses to accept applications for its RFPs and to enter into contracts. Just to sort of do a kickoff on this, the deadline for this is May 5th at 12 noon. That is not 12:01, it is not 12:05, it is not 1 o'clock. It can be anytime up to 12 noon. We encourage people, and I specifically encourage people constantly to submit, their applications early. The eProcurement system is built on an Oracle platform. It can be a little complicated or not necessarily the most intuitive experience you might have ever had with a piece of software. And while in the 3 years that I've been working with this system, it has never once crashed. I do know that sometimes people's computers do not get along with eProcurement, and that might cause your computer to crash even though the system is not crashing. So the 12 o'clock due date is a hard and fast date. At 12 o'clock, if you are still working on your application and you haven't submitted quite yet, you will have this horrible experience of having your application simply be sucked away, and you will never see it again. In fact, you will never see it again. We can't even see them, and it will just be gone. And if you don't, and the only way we can accept applications is via eProcurement. We can't accept scanned copies. We can't accept hard copies. We can't accept email copies. We cannot accept, improvisational dance applications, although I'd love to see one. There's lots of different things, but we can't accept them unless they're in eProcurement. And if you don't get it in by the time, the only way that we can allow for you to apply past that deadline is to reopen the RFP and have everybody who submitted an application reapply. And that makes almost no one happy ever. So if you are new to the system and you need to register your organization into eProcurement, you can go online to the City of Chicago's Department of Procurement and go to online bidding. You will see the RFP. You will see instructions on how to register your organization. If you are not sure, you can call me. I will give my number. My number is on one of the screens at the end of this presentation. It's in the RFP. If you Google, Julia Talbot, City of Chicago, it comes up because it's in my phone number and email, or in every RFP. You can call me. I am more than happy to look up your organization and see if you already have an account in eProcurement, because there's no reason to set up 2 accounts. It really just confuses everything and ultimately sometimes messes with if you're getting paid out for an existing contract and you start another application or put your organization in twice. That gets complicated. If you have technical assistant questions, you can go to the customer support at cityofchicago.org or call the OBM eProcurement helpline, which is 312-744-HELP, or that would be 4357. And they are the people that you really want to call if you're having a specific or complicated question about eProcurement or your computer or your organization's ability to interface with the eProcurement platform. In addition, there are a lot of training materials and videos that are on the City of Chicago website. I have a lot of training materials and PowerPoint kind of handouts that I have done over the years. And so I'm happy to share those. Many of those things are posted on the web. There's a lot of resources to help you kind of start and get through this process. In addition, we will be going through 2 of the most common experiences people have, and I can give you some screenshots, and those will be posted. I think those are posted already in the application as an attachment. They'll be posted in the webinar amendments that we do, and if you need them sent to you directly, I can send them to you directly as well. We do the next slide. So when we're talking about starting your application in eProcurement, as Lisa was saying, I cannot stress to you enough to please read the RFP. I know that it's a dense document. I know that it might be just the kind of relaxing bedtime reading that we're all looking for, but it has a lot of important information, and it really will help you inform your decision making in your development process in writing this, both developing the program but then writing your application. in a manner that is going to be successful for you. The selection criteria that Lisa went over is directly connected to the scope that she also went over, which is directly connected to the applications questions that we ask. We go through each application question and we make sure that it identifies it aligns directly with one of the selection criteria that we outlined. So and then the evaluation tool that we use and the scoring rubrics that we develop directly fall out of all of these things. They are directly connected to that selection criteria and how it intersects with the application question, which all rolls up into the RFP scope. So if I've said this in the prior meetings that we've had, like the best applications are going to be ones where you look at your agency's mission, you look at what you're capable and interested in doing, and you're looking at this, you look closely at the RFP and the scope, and you develop answers to the application questions that are relevant, that can tie and connect those two things, that your mission and the scope together in a way that's going to really be a great program for participants, but really sort of take your organization in the direction that you want it to go in. Of course, the caveat around that is that there's a 4,000 character limit for each answer. So every application that you see sort of a text box, answer 4, there's a 4,000 character limit that includes punctuation and spaces. We really, really, really encourage people to write their answers out in a word processing or word program and do the character counts that way. But then also, because as I alluded to that minute that at 12:01 you hadn't pressed send and your application was stuffed away, we find that that the application, once it's been submitted, even if it was properly submitted, sometimes it's a little hard to find. You really want to keep your application in a separate Word document just so that you have it in a readable form that makes sense to you, that you can refer back to it, that you don't lose your work, and that you have that, you can do the character counts for your answers. In eProcurement, if you exceed the 4,000 character count, eProcurement won't really tell you that, it just cuts you off mid-sentence. The eProcurement program works best in the Internet Explorer browser. I've used it successfully with Chrome and Firefox, but if you are experiencing a lot of trouble, you're getting kicked out a lot, you're timing out, you're getting a lot of error messages, things just don't seem to be taking, try it in Internet Explorer. That's the program, that's the browser that it was developed to work best in, and I tend to tell people to default to that if they're having problems. The other kind of pro tip I'm going to give you is do not use the back button on your browser when you're working in eProcurement. What happens is that the system will kind of fake you out. It will look like it's still working, but then when you go to save, you'll get an error message and it won't have registered or saved any of the information that you put in since you used that back button on your browser. This is something that I have done to myself any number of times, and then you just feel dumb because you lost a lot of work, and in my case, I theoretically knew better. Going to the next slide, we're going to talk about some additional tips for working in eProcurement. Some people were talking about, well, what about if I have to make 2 submissions? If you make 2 submissions, you need to, each submission has to have a unique user account associated with that submission, but the email address in that user account can be the same. One of the things that we talk about is with communication in eProcurement is that when you set up an account in eProcurement, it has an email address, and we're going to use that email address to communicate with you. So make sure that there's a person on the other end of that email address that it's going to go to, and that person also sometimes checks their spam, because every once in a while something from eProcurement will end up in your junk folder, your spam folder, and you need to kind of be on top of that. I've had unfortunate experiences where we had sent out pretty critical information about, like, hey, we have a question, or hey, can you come in, or really need to call us, and it went to not to a junk folder, it would go to an email address that wasn't operational, or it went to an email address that nobody ever checked, or the person had left, or the person was on vacation or maternity leave, or they had quit. Please, please, please when you're setting up this application, make sure that the email addresses that it's going to, the account that you're registering, that you're logging into to build the application is hooked up to an email address that is going to be checked routinely. I know, especially in these times where things seem rather confusing and everybody, like, who knows where anybody is working, you know, like, or going to any particular day, that just try to, try please to let us know what to make sure that you're doing this in an environment where the email is going to somewhere and somebody's going to be checking it, because and especially in these times when things are so confusing, we really are depending on email addresses to be live so that we can communicate with you guys in the most timely manner as possible about anything concerning eProcurement. That would be my plug.
And this is Lisa, and I would just say, for example, if for some reason we did decide to extend the submission, we would only let people know through eProcurement. So you will not get a personal email from any of us here. It will not go to your executive director, but we will not do a mass mailing. We will only let people know that change is happening for those that have started an application already. So that's an example of what Julia's talking about it's got to be someone who's checking that system and checking that email often for those kind of announcements, that they would only come through eProcurement. That is not something we would send out wide through DFSS communication channels.
Right. One of the functions in the eProcurement environment that I really like is that you can actually submit your application and pull it back as many times as you want until the actual deadline. So if you want to submit, you think you're done a couple of days early, that's absolutely fabulous, and you're my secret favorite. But then you decide, hey, I want to change my answer, I forgot to upload something. You can, in fact, go into the application, pull it back, upload what you need to do, and then resubmit. And you can do that as many times as you want. As I have said, we really can't accept anything late. I would much rather have people, if I had to, sort of the Sophie's choice of applications, if I had to choose somebody submitting something that was 3/4 done or something that was not submitted at all, I would rather have the 3/4 done one to look at. So that would be what I would say about that. We say here, avoid the rush and possible mishaps by submitting early, and plan on your submission taking 15 to 30 minutes. I think that I say 15 to 30 minutes. Everybody who actually has to do this says an hour. We're going to go through we'll go through the steps on what it is to submit. Unfortunately, it's not one of those like rom-com kind of submittals where you just press send and it disappears. It's sort of like you press send and then 5 screens later, it disappears, sort of. I encourage people, if you have questions, to make use of the eProcurement hotline. And also just not, or you can call me, you can email me about your problems. If you just need to vent, you can email me about that too. Just note that the hotline operates during business hours, which are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I tend to operate through business hours about that. I tend to check my emails and stuff a little bit more obsessively. So on the off chance that you do a later night or an earlier morning or a weekend, you will see that and respond, but the party line is the hotline at least operates Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And that you should also know that, like, we all are doing our best to answer your calls as quickly and as thoroughly and as helpfully as possible, but that if you call and you get a busy signal or you have to leave a message, we'll call you back, and most likely we will call you back within 24 to 48 hours. Like, really, you get calls like within the day or the next day, generally speaking. And so I understand that, like, it's maddening to have to leave a message when you're right in the middle of something and you get hung up on it or something. But do understand, like, we're doing our best, and we can see, we keep a log of who calls. We know if you call 4 times and then you call me 4 times, we wise up to that, and it's just not showing your best self. We will still answer your question, but we do understand, we do we do kind of keep track of those things. We also can keep track of, we also see who is going in and out and sort of where they are in their applications in the e-procurement system. And so if you are, unfortunately, you miss a deadline, we can really see you trying to press send at 11, at 12:05 or 1:05 or whatever. So we have and we can see where you were in your application in terms of how complete it was. I know that no one on this call has ever done this, but every big application that we do, there's somebody who's like, I missed the deadline, and you look and they were trying to submit it late, and then when you look at the application, it was like a third done. So we can see that. So just, tell us the truth about what's going on, and put your best self, be your best self. One thing I wanted to talk about specific to this application, I'm going to turn it back over to the program staff here, was to talk that while we always have our application questions, these text boxes, this time we have a vignette. It's going to be a little different.
Yeah, so we are asking everyone to complete a vignette, which to Julia's point is different from an application question standpoint, because you have to complete the vignette. It doesn't have a word count limit per se in the text box. We're asking you to do it as a Word document and then upload that in the process. And so we just want to raise that here, so as people look at it, understand that the vignette itself is attached, but then you have to attach your response back. And there are some criteria around like length we don't want a dissertation. And so, but we just want to remind people that that is a document that you have to attach. So as Julia talks about time and making sure you give yourself time, what takes a lot of time is the uploading of documents, budgets, vignettes, those sorts of things. So we just want to raise that there is a vignette here, and we want to make sure that people understand that you have to attach the response to that question. It's not something you type in. So I'm going to ask, someone's asking a question right now saying, hey, I am on iSupplier, but I can't find this RFP. I put in service coordination navigation for risk for young, but can't find it. What should I do? So the RFP actually has an RFP number on it, and so you should search by the RFQ. So the RFQ for this is 7276, and it lists, and they are organized by the date they were released. So this was released on March 4th. So you also may have to search across to March 4th and look at all of the RFPs that released that day. Keep in mind, EProcurement is for the entire city of Chicago. So you're not going to just see ours, you're going to see everything that we're bidding on in the city, from soap to hand sanitizer to this RFP. So if you're searching by the RFQ number, it is 7276. If not, you have to go to the day, which is March 4th, when this was released. And then there are like 5 things that were released that day. We are one of the things that were released that day.
You can look in the column that will say DFSS. Now we're going to go in and we're going to talk about how to accept an amendment. We do generally, we do at least one amendment per RFP. We do that because we like to upload the webinar and the questions that came out of the webinar. So I'm just going to step you through that process. You actually can't really work on your application if you don't accept the amendment. And I will say this, that the amendment, like the accepting of the amendment is a rather sort of lengthy process. And the reason that it is lengthy is because we want you to actually, when you are accepting, amending, viewing, accepting, acknowledging, all these things to the amendment, it's that we actually want you to read the amendment, and because we're going to hold you responsible for the knowledge in the amendment. There's a question that we have in the application. I mean, I guess this is a spoiler alert, that we say, I attest that I read the RFP. We also want you to read the amendment because we want you to we get applications and then you say, well, why did you apply for this? Or what was that about? And somebody says, well, that's, like you get an application and it's for otters and it's a great program, but it's for otters. And you're like, well, why'd you apply for otters? And they're like, well, I really like otters. And you say, but did you read the RFP? And everybody kind of looks at their shoes. And so just read the RFP, read the amendment. There's a lot of information. It will really help you. It will help you go forward. It might help you go backwards. You know, like who knows? But just read it. So, and the amendment is no exception. You get to go through 5 screens that basically attest that you that you read the thing and that you understand what you're signing yourself up for. And if it comes down to, like, we said, oh, by the way, like, you know, we want you to type this all with your left hand in the amendment, and then it turns out that you didn't, we're going to be like, well, and you said, well, we have 15 screens that said that you read the amendment and that theoretically you understood it. So you don't have much of an argument on that. So, so just read it, I guess, is my feeling. So the RFP that, you know, you're interested in has been amended. If you want to start an application, which I assume you do, although maybe after this you don't, you need to acknowledge and accept the amendment first. So when you go to, the way that you start an application in the e-procurement system is that you go with the create quote action, and it will say, warning, this RFP has been amended. You must do all these things. You must acknowledge the amendment. If you want to view the amendment history, you click on anything in blue in the system takes you to something else. So if you want to view the amendment history, you can look at that. If you see the amendment description right below the actions, let's go down, amendment description. So right below create quote, it says amendment description. This amendment is to remind applicants that the CHDO certification and recertification. So there's always like a little like summarization blurb about what the amendment's about. And so you're going to say create quote, you're going to hit go because that's what you want to do to get started, and you're going to get this screen that says basically you're going to be considered for award, you must acknowledge the amendment and submit all your responses to ensure that they comply with the changes. So if you've already started an application, by acknowledging and accepting and all of the things that you do to this amendment, it will pull everything that you have already worked on forward into a new application for you. That's one nice thing. If you want to look at you know, if you want to review the amended changes to the RFP, you can click on the review changes, those little eyeglasses. That would allow you that allows you to acknowledge and receive the understanding. But the one on the left-hand side is the number 1. If you hit the document number, that will take you to the whole RFP and where the amendment is. And then when you have thoroughly embraced whatever this amendment says, you know, wrote a poem about it, and you've learned to live with this new amended stuff, you're going to hit number 3, the acknowledge amendment. So that allows you to acknowledge the amendment, where you then, this is my one beef with e-procurement, is that they couldn't make an acceptance box bigger. So you then will go to click the box that say you accept the terms and conditions of the RFP, and you acknowledge the changes made to the RFQ amendment document, and then the name, and then you hit acknowledge. And then you get to this next box that says click on yes to indicate that you confirm your acknowledgement of the amendment. And because you're still on top of it and you love this amendment more than maybe some of your relatives, you click yes. So then it takes you to yet another screen, because we're just not sure at the city if you really love it that much, you know, or you're excited about it. Then so now we go, here's another tiny box that you have to click at the bottom of your screen. I think Lisa was the one who pointed out that it's really good when you're working in e-procurement, go full screen, because there's nothing but tiny things that you have to click, usually at the very bottom or the very top or the very corner, and like you spend a lifetime looking for them if you don't do full screen. So you're going to click the tiny box saying that you've read and accepted the terms and conditions, and then you're going to accept. You can either accept on the top right-hand side or on the bottom right-hand side, because we're just that flexible. So, and that is how you how you accept an amendment, and now we are all sort of better people for the experience. So now you have accepted all the amendments, you have written your application, you have uploaded the things that you want to upload, including your brilliant, like probably award-winning, at least Pulitzer Prize-winning vignette, and you're ready to submit. And because you're also far better and more organized than I am, you're probably doing this 2 or 3 days early. right? And so you're going to submit the application. So when you are ready to submit, you're going to start by saving your draft one last time because, hey, you can't save too often in life, right? And then you're going to click continue. And then you might get some error messages because that's just how it works. Now, I've been telling people that the error messages, I find these to be a little cryptic sometimes. It's kind of like a word search. So the error message will say something. Usually it's something that I don't immediately understand, but it will tell you what you need to do to make it go away. In this case, you must quote at least one line on the RFQ. You'll see right below there's a little thing that says lines. You're going to go into that. And when this is a common error message, we don't require that you give us a budget in the EProcurement platform. We want you to do an Excel spreadsheet and load it and attach it for us. And that is what we use to review your application. We don't look at this. But if you're, as part of sort of a technicality, if you're going to get a contract, these lines have to be filled out. You have to put a 1 or a 0 or a number or something just to kind of as a placeholder. And so it will tell you, so you'll go to the lines and you'll do that. In this case, here's another very common error is about an unanswered question. And so in this, it says the quote value is required for requirement first name. And then in this case, quote value is what EProcurement calls basically, an answer. So quote value or quote usually alludes to an empty box that you need to put something in. And then requirements is what we refer to, is how EProcurement refers to the application question. And then the name of the application question in this case is first name. In reality, it will probably say something more complicated than first name because generally speaking, people, you might not have filled out, most people manage to fill in their first names, but you never know, there's always room. And so when you get an error message that says the quote value is required for requirement first name, you're like, oh, I forgot to fill out that little, that blurb. And you go and you fill it out, and then you basically, save again. And then when your application is all free from these errors, you are ready to proceed and submit. And so at this point, you will, hit the continue button, and this will put your, go back. You'll get this thing that says review and submit. And so that will show you're ready, and you'll click on continue and go forward. And then you'll get this screen. And this is the screen that shows you everything you filled out. It's your one place to kind of review everything that you need to review. If you need to do an edit on it, you can edit it and go back. But since you're perfect, you've done such a great job, what you'll do is at the bottom of the screen, you will be asked to provide electronic signature. When you provide the electronic signature, you're going to put in your name and your title first, and then you will check the box. If you check the box first, like I did the first 4 times I was testing this, it just gives you an error message, and you have to go back and put in your name first because that's how they want you to do it. So put in your name, put in your title, check the box, and then you will go over to the lower right-hand corner, and there's, on the next slide, you will be able to see where it says submit. And you will submit, and then your life will be perfect, no doubt. So when you see this submittal confirmation, that is kind of what you're going to get from us. OBM is working on sending people emails with a confirmation that they submitted, but at this point, let's just go with, this is all the submission, all the confirmation you get from the EProcurement system. I personally would like to have more colors on that, but or at least something like fireworks. I mean, there's so many things you can do with computers. I don't really understand why it's so that. But we really want you to take a screenshot of that and just let that be what you have to say. Let that be your proof. If you're a kind of a person that's prone to worrying about such things, you can always call me and I will look it up. I can send you instructions on how you can log out and then go back in and make sure that your application was submitted. And so that's that. So that is how you would submit. I think now we're going to go, if you have questions, there's time for questions, and then there's a screen at the end that has Lisa and my contact information.
Thanks, Julia. So we are once again opening up for any additional questions folks may have, either about anything we covered today that we can answer, and/or anything in regards to accepting an amendment and uploading your submission. I just want to stress, as Julia has stressed, for those who have used and submitted RFPs before for us, it is different in that you do a lot of the forms we've preloaded for you. So the budget form, some of the vignette form, everything is in there. You just have to read them, and then there are instructions in regards to responding accordingly. When will the respondent know when awards are made? So our goal, if we stick to the timetable as is that we'll read these and know by June who the delegate agencies are, and our goal is to be able to tell you then. So historically, the way things work here is folks are awarded awarded contracts, and we can't necessarily let you know until after budget season. I think after last budget season, and because of the lateness of that, there was a little bit of panic because of the heavy lift we're asking people to do for this. We have been given permission that we can let people know in June and July, so we can start preparing and for folks to launch January 1. And that's if we stick to the current timeline. Will be available up to the submission date. I will be available until May 4th. I'm not available the day of, because at that point, programmatically, to be honest, there really isn't anything I can help you with on the 5th at this point, if you're calling me on the 5th. As we say, start early, save often. One of the things, once again, if you have additional questions programmatically, feel free to email us. Clearly, email, I will say, for me is the easiest way, rather than calling. And just given the nature of the beast, that everything's changing every day here, some of us may be moving to telework, so email is the best way to communicate, at least I know for the prevention and intervention team, because most of us may not be here in the office, we'll be working from home. We also just want to say, to Julia's point, I want to stress, make sure that you save a copy in Word, if you can, of your submission. We do offer, for those who submit an application and are not awarded, we do give you the opportunity to meet with the Deputy Commissioner to go over your submission and how it was evaluated and where there were areas of strength and where there were challenges. And when we did this for our mentoring, what we heard a lot of people say is, well, I had a grant writer write this, so I didn't see it. Or, you know what, I haven't really seen the final submission. So we really suggest that you save a copy so you know exactly what was submitted. And if for any reason in the process after you submit and we're in evaluation phase and somebody leaves, please let us know, because once again, when we make the award or we decide, hey, this is the person we want to choose, we're going to go back through EProcurement in order to let you know you were awarded or not awarded. So just make sure that you're staying on top of those email addresses and our contacts, so we know. To Julia's point, she always says start 30 minutes early. I always say start an hour early in your submission, just because the uploads take some time. And to Julia's point again, if you can even submit it a day earlier, then you have a peaceful night's rest and you don't have to worry about it. That's even better as well. So thank you. We will be posting, and this will be available online. We also have the 2 handouts of other funding opportunities that are also going on right now. And some of those might have a lower threshold for folks. And that's R3 money through the state. That's targeting communities that were hardest hit by cannabis and marijuana use. And so there's dollars out for providers in those community areas, which mirror a lot of the 15 community areas that have been identified by the Mayor's Office of Violence Reduction. And then there's also grants that are out right now through Cook County. So even though some of us are telecommuting and other things, county and state and citywide, we are still working. And so unless, to everyone's point, once again, we are still leaning towards a May 5th submission date. unless you learn otherwise through EProcurement. That is the date. That is not going to move at this point, and people should be working towards that date for their submission. We are excited. Thank you very much for your attention and time. If you have any other additional questions post this, by all means, please reach out. And thank you, and have a good rest of your day, and stay 6 feet away from each other.
And wash your hands.
I wash your hands.
And be healthy.
And be healthy. Thank you.